Yeah.
Thank you.
The floor is yours.
Thank you. Let me find my presentation. There it is.
Brilliant. And again, I will show my face when the time will be coming to an end. Thank you.
No worries. So, hello everyone. My name is Victor Perez. I am a PhD researcher at the Uni of York in my 4th year. And today I'm going to present part of my findings, which are consonant and dissonant bodily vibrancies leading creative work from a new materialist perspective. The structure of the presentation is straightforward, so I will present the context. I will outline my research questions. I will present my data collection methods and philosophical position, and I will finalize my presentation with some of my findings and empirical evidence. So, from a critical point of view, most of research is underpinned by the principle of performativity, in which we tend to generate instrumental knowledge for the sake of profit, performance, and effectiveness. And the analogy I like to do is that we have a cow, and the cow gives you milk, like this one, which is here on the slide. And usually the performativity aspect of knowledge creation is that we try to get more milk out of the same cow. Therefore, we try to find this sort of input-output ratio in which we minimize the inputs to maximize the outputs. In this context, creativity has been a sort of key predictor for organizational performance. So following these assumptions, especially the one that says that based on the competitive environment we are living in, to remain competitive, we need to engage in the generation of new and useful ideas. That means that through more and better creativity, organizations will survive, will success, and we have developed this sort of contemporary mantra in which everything that is new is better than the old, giving creativity a huge position within the management rhetoric. Within this rhetoric, people like Barsooner, and this is an old quotation, but I think it's very interesting. He says that creativity has become what divine grace and salvation were to former times. It is incessantly invoked, praised, urged, demanded, hoped for, declared achieved, or found lacking. This shows the position that creativity has achieved throughout the last decades as well. In this context, usually when we talk about creativity and leadership, the question of how creativity can be managed or not dominates most of mainstream leadership literature. That means that it is often assumed that leaders or this heroic figure make a big difference for the success or enabling of creativity at work. That means that we tend to focus on traits, abilities, and behaviors of individual leaders and how they can influence creativity at work. So we have research focusing on how leaders, by means of their authentic or servant transformational qualities, they can influence creativity in the workplace. So in a recent review of the literature, my name and colleagues, they said that leaders foster employees' creativity, they provide the vision, and they synthesize the creative contributions, what they called facilitate, direct, and integrate, which reflects to some extent this sort of heroic-centric approach. So within this rhetoric, we have this sort of leadership fairy tale, that, as I call it, that means that leadership is seen as the all-in-one solution for every problem, including that of creativity. Leadership determines the fate of organizations. So we have this sort of mythical figure, saving the organization. And therefore, in the 90s, people like Emil and Oakley, they put leadership as a social myth, and which is always positive, necessary, and good, what Collinson also called the Prozac leadership approach. So we have a lot of literature pointing out towards prescriptive accounts on how to be a better leader, how to have more and better leadership, and how this can affect creativity. So we have a romantic rhetoric around heroes like males riding in a white horse, or On the other hand, when we have a sort of distributed or shared leadership perspectives, we change the idea of heroic leaders for that of heroic collectives, in which everyone can be a leader, bringing with it all this rhetoric of individual people. The problem with all of this rhetoric is that there is an anthropocentric approach in which we tend to praise this figure of the leader. Therefore, the leader embodies all of these different qualities. And this leads to a proprietary perspective of leadership in which leadership is either something possessed by this person called leader, or is something that is produced just within human-to-human relations. Therefore, usually we have this sort of disembodied perspective in which leadership seems to emanate from nowhere or maybe somewhere out of the mind. And therefore, we take materiality for granted. So how bodies, non-human bodies, also co-produce leadership in the workplace. In the last couple of decades or years, there's a growing body of literature examining how non-humans also contribute to the leadership phenomenon. People like scholars as Orlikowski, she says that matter is much more than something passive or an accessory in organizations, but it is something deeply ingrained in every aspect of organizations. If we think about ourselves, we are matter. We are sit in front of a desk, in a chair, so it's not just us in a vacuum, but there are many other bodies which are also doing its role in the background. So from this perspective, leadership involves not just human minds and souls, but human bodies and non-human bodies like buildings, places, or suits, rooms, tools, documents, and so on. Therefore, within this literature field or body, matter is seen as something that has a affective capacity in which actively and effectively they can co-produce and enact leadership in the workplace. The theoretical toolkit I used for my research was grounded on new materialisms, specifically on assemblage theories and affect theories, and I talk in the plural because usually new materialisms is a sort of eclectic family of theories that share the common assumption of problematizing the taken for granted status of the human and try to bring the non-human into the discussion. Therefore, new materialisms understand matter and bodies in a relational sense, so as an enactment or a process of materialization. Deleuze and Guattari, they said that we know nothing about a body until we know what it can do. In other words, what its affects are, how they can or cannot enter into composition with other affects, with the affects of other bodies, either to destroy that body or to be destroyed by it, either to exchange actions and passions with it or to join in composing a more powerful body. What they're talking here is about affects, that is the bodily capacities to affect and be affected. That means that bodies are not just something inert or dead, but they have the capacity to affect the flow of action in the workplace. In terms of my questions, I have three broad questions, which is how does leadership materially emerge, unfold, and entangle with creativity at work? And therefore, what are the leaderful qualities of matter? And what are the flows of affect between these assembled leadership relations? From a philosophical point of view, I followed a relational ontoepistemology, which acknowledges that knowledge production and reality are entangled because we are of the world, as Barat says. And from this perspective, the world is not understood as something fixed or stable, but as always in the making within a flow of events, within dynamic networks and assemblages. And to conduct my research, I did a 34-week affective ethnography that recognizes that everything in the workplace, text, materials, actors, matter are already entangled. And therefore, we should read this entanglement through interactions. That means how bodies emerge together when they encounter each other. I combined this with a virtual approach because I was doing my research in the middle of the pandemic. Therefore, I kept the tradition of ethnographic data collection, doing observations, semi-structured interviews, and other projective techniques. some of them online, other face-to-face, depending on the lockdown measures of the moment. To develop my analysis, I followed a grounded theory and abductive reasoning, because also we are not a blank sort of canvas. We come to the field with a set of tools, theories, and ideas that entangle us well in the field. To do my analysis, I combined a coding and post-coding approach because, of course, first we need to make sense of the bulk of data. I needed to make sense of 1,500 pages of transcriptions and field notes. Therefore, I had to do a sort of coding work at the beginning. And this combined with an ethological analysis in which I tried to identify human and non-human relations in the workplace. That means that I tried to search for affects. That means how bodies affected each other and what they produced in those encounters. Therefore, I traced bodies and relations, and I tried to map what was happening in that place. So in terms of findings, I have developed this idea of the leaderful quality of material encounters, because rather than being led by people or by objects, my theory is that we are led by what happens within the encounters between bodies in the workplace. We are led by the flows of affects produced in those encounters. And one of these leaderful quality of material encounters is this idea of dissonant and consonant vibrancies at work. So in this part, I'm going to tell you some stories that I experienced in the field, which according to Boji are anti-narratives. So this is not a finished story. It is always on the making. It is fragmented, and it will show fragments of materiality. The context is a branding project that the company was developing called Cursive. So in my fifth day, of fieldwork, I encountered Cursive for the very first time. I didn't know what it was. I knew that it was a sort of branding project the company was developing because, my fieldwork was within a design and also software development company. And they were working this project, and I wasn't sure what was this. And the owner said to me whether I wanted to follow this project. So 13 days after they the owner presented for the very first